Welcome, I'm Wasabi, and today I'll be doing a quick review on the DCC Horror Funnel / Level 1 adventure, A Conspiracy of Ravens. Before I jump into spoilers, I'll explain the premise really quickly to see if this is an adventure you'd like your Game Master to run for you. You find yourselves awoken by the tolling of bells in the middle of the night. Your families and friends have disappeared. Outside is dark and oppressive with fog obscuring your view. You see some of your neighbors or even your past compatriots are near you and equally confused. Something is very wrong in the village of Meaden, and it seems like it's up to you to figure out what exactly that is. So, if that sounds like a fun premise for you and your group, shoot this video over to your Game Master, and if you are a Game Master looking to run this, then stick around as we unravel this adventure. This is one of the most unique dungeon crawls I've ever run. It's honestly more of what I'm going to call a village crawl, as the players make their way down streets and into buildings instead of rooms and hallways. Any characters straying off of the roads or trying to exit the town leads to them being grabbed by shadowy figures in the fog who will quickly smother and kill them. The leveled characters have a higher chance to live, but overall these motivations serve to keep the players in the dungeon and going down the paths, which is a fantastically creative way to have walls and a semi-linear route. Another great aspect is that the players are from the town, so there is a player map and the characters can navigate the town fairly easily. Taking a known area and perverting it is a great way to make exploration less tedious, while also very helpful for me as a Game Master when running the game. One problem I run into, especially with online games, is that sometimes there is miscommunication, and some players get confused as to where they are currently located, and have trouble orienting themselves in their head. Having the entire dungeon laid out in front of the players made both games I ran go very smoothly. Named locations on the player map acted as good points of interest for the players to look at, and it led to a much more player-directed game. Instead of players gingerly opening doors to discover what was on the other side, they would see names like the Copper Cup Tavern or Anna's Apothecary and ask questions about what their characters knew about them, and would make decisions based on that. I'm a big fan of players having more choice in what they want to do, which can sometimes be a challenge in a dungeon crawl, so I hope to see more adventures like this in the future. As for the art, there's an impressive amount of it that I found very helpful for conveying what the players see in front of them, as well as setting the mood. In the next section where I go through the entire adventure, I will show a lot of the artwork during relevant sections, which will speak for itself. But overall, there is way more art in here than I was expecting from a third-party adventure, and the artist did not chicken out in making some of the pieces particularly gory. Anyway, let's get into the adventure itself. So to quickly explain the adventure background, a faction of wizards named the Ravens are trying to summon a greater demon. Their plan is to seal off the town of Meaden, create a magical fog that lulls the inhabitants into a mindless complacency, and sacrifice the entire village to create enough energy to summon Mistal Rasanes, the 14th king of hell. So far, they have succeeded in sealing off the town and creating the magical fog, but there's been a complication. It seems like some of the villagers aren't affected by the fog for some mysterious reason, and that's where the players come in. A Conspiracy of Ravens has two starts, one for the level 0s and one for the level 1s. Regardless of either level, the player characters are woken up by the bells from the church in the southernmost part of the map, and they soon discover that their families and friends have all disappeared. The player characters quickly find each other in the dark and foggy night and set off to figure out what is going on in their village. So the big difference if you play this as a funnel instead of as a leveled game is that when you play it as a funnel, half the group starts in one cul-de-sac and the other group starts in the opposite one. Then, both groups have mirrored events where they each come across a demon disguised as a child, being attacked by ravens in the street who they will more than likely help and take with them. And then when both groups meet at the crossroads, the demon children try to turn the two groups against each other, possibly with the help of magic, and failing that, transform into their true forms and attack both groups. As for the level 1 opening, the group starts in one cul-de-sac and comes across a demon child faking being attacked by ravens in the same way it plays out in the funnel. The difference here being that at the crossroads, the village baker's body lies mutilated on the ground, and another demon child pretending to be the baker's son is sobbing on top of the corpse. The girl will prod the players to go help the child, and both demon children will spring surprise attacks at the opportune moment. I ran this game twice, both as a funnel and as a level 1 game. In both, I used the level 1 opening as I found it to be simpler, but also when I ran the funnel, it was for 3 players, so I couldn't split them up in 2 groups as cleanly. I would love to hear how the funnel opening went for people who did use that one, but for me, I found it a bit more complex than I wanted when getting some new people situated into DCC. As for the opening I used, it worked perfectly both times. In fact, the groups became very wary of what few people they came across for the rest of the game, and it really set the tone. Also, both groups fell for it. Anyway, reaching the crossroads is where the opening ends and the game opens up a little. From here, the group can either head north and talk to Reese the Seer and hopefully glean some info from her. They can even attempt to leave the village, but that won't end well due to the nasty, shadowy figure barring their way. Or they can head south and experience where the rest of the adventure is. As I stated before, the beauty of this scenario taking place in a location the characters are familiar with is that the players both times are able to more easily plan out what they want to do as new information was fed to them. Also, the simple yet clever opening of the bell being the only clue for them to follow will naturally lead them to head south. I found the combination of these two elements were really effective in keeping players engaged, as it never felt like anyone was lost and had enough player choice without being overwhelming. This adventure is dense with content. It's very impressive, but a group is not going to be able to experience all of it, and you're not meant to. I'm going to quickly go over what I assume will be the expected encounters, but I can't cover every encounter in detail as there's a lot to discover and meet in. I recommend any encounters you don't use, you should steal for other adventures, or swap where some encounters take place if you're running it multiple times, just for some variety for yourself. So the first thing that the group will come across is the Dented Shoe, a smithy run by a dwarf who is in some kind of trance. The players will find him hammering an already finished magical silver sword and mumbling about how the mayor needs to receive the sword. Now, as you can tell, Tomlin the Dwarf is not looking too hot, and I highly recommend showing the art to your players, as both times it made the group a bit uneasy and wary of Tomlin, especially after dealing with the kids. Tomlin, however, is harmless if not provoked, as the only way to provoke him is to forcefully take the sword, but you can rob him blind of everything else in the smithy and he will literally not bat an eye. Also, he'll give up the sword with a moderately difficult personality check. More than likely, the group will grab the sword and keep moving without too much trouble. The leveled group decided to head for the mayor's house after this in the hopes of more answers and a possible ally. The level zeros, on the other hand, actively avoid the mayor's house and head the opposite direction, not wanting to lose their shiny new toy. Directly across from the Dented Shoe is an encounter with some savage dogs I actually vetoed using, as the group just had two fights pretty much back to back with the Ravens and the Demon Children. There is nothing wrong with this encounter, in fact it's a nice little gruesome scene. The dogs are usually sweet and pleasant pets, but the players find the dogs munching on their previous owner's body. So keep it in if you like it, but if you want to sort of give your players a little bit of a break from another combat, I would say just let it go just like I did, or bring it back later if they end up going down that street. Maybe when they come back, the dogs are there. With that out of the way, I'd like to talk about the named building the dogs are in front of. The encounter is in front of the bakery Sweet Cakes. Now there's no information in the module on Sweet Cakes, but in both groups there was a player who got excited about the bakery and hoped to steal some snacks considering the baker isn't going to miss him. When this happened and they checked out the shop, I used it as an opportunity to push the weirdness and horror further. I described how the baked goods were rotting and moldy as if they had been there for weeks, even though the players knew they were baked fresh that day. But if you want to be extra cruel, describe how the baker's delicious eclairs had obviously been baked just before everything went down, and their mouth-watering aroma fills the air. And if a player bites into one, describe that instead of being filled with delicious cream, they are filled with maggots and cockroaches instead. Now, don't blame me if you do this to your foodie friend and they never talk to you again. So at this point, the group has explored everything this crossroads has to offer, and they can keep going down south or go down one of the streets to the east and west. The western cul-de-sac offers some weird encounters with dead bodies and a gravedigger. The eastern one has an encounter with a kid in a burning building who isn't a demon in disguise, and up the street from that encounter is a shrine to a deity named Tyrannus, whom the church in the south is also dedicated to. Now, both groups I ran for were very goal-oriented and didn't explore the side streets. So if you want them to go down either side, I recommend explaining they smell smoke coming from the eastern side, or hear somebody singing from the western side. The module also recommends using the fog to block off certain areas so that the players follow where you want them to go, but personally, I think it's a bit too obvious of a tactic, and I could see some players being taken out of the game by that. Most of the time, I prefer enticing players rather than forcing them, because I think it's a lot more powerful when the players' actions spell their own doom, rather than the game master's. Alright, moving on down, we're going to do a bit of a lightning round as there is a lot to cover here, as the players could really end up in any of these locations. Let's start with the simple ones, and then we'll get into the bigger ones afterwards. So firstly, we have in the west a massive group of ravens that will attack the party, more and more joining each round, causing either the group to fight back or run for cover in one of the nearby houses until the birds disperse. Just past that encounter, we have Merc's Mercantile, a shop full of supplies that could be very useful for a group in the final fight. All the way in the east, we have a wizard apprentice pretending to be attacked by a couple of homunculi, so that the party tries to save him and he can stab them in the back. And I mean that literally. The apprentice will use the distraction of the fight to try and sneak attack one of the PCs. Just up from this encounter is the Copper Cup, a tavern stocked full of booze and some other goodies, such as an enlarged scroll and the entire life savings of the family that owns the tavern. Alright, next up after that, closer to the middle, we have an apothecary full of potions with some useful abilities such as raising stats or healing. However, there is a complication. The apothecary is filled to the brim with black cats staring at the party in unison, ready to explode into a stampede at any moment if the party takes any hostile actions or moves too quickly, which could end in a catastrophe. Alright, with the smaller encounters out of the way, we can talk about the two bigger locations, the Speedling House for boys and Mayor Wenchel's house. For the Orphanarium, which is a 2-story building with multiple rooms, there are 7 creatures called Humsiers lying in wait to ambush the party. Creepy, bug-eyed primates with suction cup limbs and hundreds of sharp teeth that are intelligent enough to pull off some more advanced tactics than your average monster. There is nothing else to this building other than the ambush, but the reason why I want to make this location its own section is that I think it's a good opportunity to compile some supplies from one of the other locations into this one. As I said before, and as you can probably tell by now, this scenario is bursting at the seams with content, and if you run it as a one-shot like I did, you won't have enough time to explore everything. I recommend either throwing in the stuff found in Mark's Mercantile in different parts of the building, or even having the shrine from earlier in the scenario be somewhere in the Orphanarium. Possibly even detailing that it seems like the Humsiers have ransacked the entire Orphanarium, but for some reason have steered clear of the shrine. Finally, the last and biggest location before the final areas is Mayor Wenchel's house. This location is one big puzzle trap. When the PCs arrive, the door is wide open and the mayor's unconscious body is just across the threshold inside the house, lying in a rune circle painted with blood. Once the PCs enter, the doors will close and the group is sealed inside by magical means, and there is no way out using mundane methods. At this point, the mayor's home security system comes online and the PCs become aware of a sound increasing in volume and irritation. The security system gets increasingly violent as time passes, and each round, the effects become stronger, so the PCs have to think fast, because if the clock runs out and it hits round 10, well... The circle around Mayor Wenchel is a red herring and has nothing to do with the security system. However, on his body there is a clue, a silver musical note necklace around his neck that protects from the effects of the system. If removed, he will suffer all the cumulative effects of the system, as one of my groups found out in round 2 of the puzzle. There are 3 more of these necklaces that can be found along with some goodies such as a mastercrafted crossbow, a ring of protection, land deeds, and almost 200 gold pieces. Anyone wearing the necklaces can open the windows and doors to escape, which is one of the solutions. The other solution is finding a small crystal bell in the living room on the fireplace mantle and ringing it, turning off the system. If the players manage to not kill the mayor, he'll answer questions if pressed hard enough, otherwise he'll not reveal his involvement in letting the entire debacle occur. Moving on now to the final section of the game, the group will come across an absolutely horrific scene. A massive razor has been erected in front of a wooden stage, and enthralled villagers are being led to the top of the stage by little homunculi, and an imp smears a mark on the villagers' forehead before they jump off onto the massive blade. The imp leading the procession will notice the PCs and command his homunculi to deal with them, while he flies to the defiled church. After successfully beating the homunculi, the PCs enter the church to find the imp slicing open a villager's throat and asking for aid from Mistol Rasanes. The aid arrives in the form of a fire-breathing hellhound. Once the 2 creatures are dispatched in the climax, that's the end of the adventure. The sun rises, the fog lifts, and the town is saved, but forever changed. Now, that's how it can go, but it didn't for either of my groups. The leveled group was able to sneak and gain a surprise round during the procession with the blade, where the wizard spell burned 20 points to critical a color spray spell, and basically end everything in sight before the imp had any chance to retaliate. It was an absolutely brilliant display and a bombastic and quick end to the game. However, the funnel players had a much rougher ending. They followed the imp to the church, and in the first round, the Hellhound's 20-foot cone of fire melted everyone except 2 PCs. One was summarily killed in the following round, and the last one attempted to pledge allegiance to the imp, but was met with a gruesome end. Both endings were fun and completely different, but make sure your players remember it is a funnel, and death is absolutely a major possibility. Thankfully, my funnel players were an amazing group who were expecting death at any moment and enjoyed the end, but be aware that the climax battle truly takes no prisoners. Finally, the only location left is the town hall directly next to the church, where dozens and dozens of villagers have been kept imprisoned, waiting their turn to be sacrificed. None will remember the events of the night before and will more than likely be distraught by the shocking and gory end many of their loved ones have suffered. So I think it's pretty obvious from the entire video up until now that I am a big fan of this module. It captures a spooky horror vibe that I haven't seen in many dungeon crawling modules. With Halloween right around the corner, I think this adventure is a perfect 1 or 2 shot for the autumn season. It also works fantastically as the start of a greater campaign. I couldn't cover every little detail in this book, but there are notes in it detailing how you can make this a part of a greater campaign, as well as even having a small world map with several locations on it that you could base your campaign in. If you have any further questions about the module or anything else, please comment below and I'd be happy to answer them. And if you want more spooky content, check out my Witch Hunt Let's Play and this month's mini painting video coming near the end of the month, where I'll be trying my hand at painting a ghost. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.